Welcome to the Krusty Fox, and today we're taking a long, hard look at Sex and the City Season 1, Episode 6, titled Secret Sex. 2 weeks ago, I had my picture taken, says Carrie, to open the episode. For most people, this would be the intro to a story about getting some new headshots or posing for a friend who's into photography, but not Carrie. Carrie's version of getting her picture taken involves donning a nude nightdress and splaying herself across a bed, the pretense for which is promoting her column on the side of a bus. In Carrie's world, of course, this is all entirely correct. In the average New Yorker's world, the only way they're likely to get spread across the side of a bus is if they stand too close to the road as it pulls over. It's a short scene, and I don't want to dwell on it for too long, but the montage of Carrie's photo shoot is hilarious. It features the kind of faux quirky behaviour usually only seen in Liam Neeson's home movies before he sets out to avenge a family member's murder. But never fear, Carrie's brief ascension to the kind of life she spends her time and career endlessly judging others for is short-lived. She quickly returns to her first love, roasting her confusingly patient friends in voiceover. Carrie's on her way to her first date with Mr. Big, you see, and rather than feel a twinge of gratitude that her three besties gave up their Friday nights to help her get ready, she instead accuses them of not having social lives of their own. Quick reminder, the group Carrie's chewing out here includes Samantha, who proves beyond a shadow of a doubt through the rest of the series that there are a million places she could and would probably prefer to be at any given time. Mind you, I don't want to let Samantha off the hook quite so fast here. Carrie walks in wearing the gossamer thin piece of fabric some sick individual at the photo shoot told her was couture, and Samantha fawns over it. I'm left to assume that she just needed to stop Carrie in her tracks, since if she moved any closer then the two Phillips head screwdrivers she has in place of nipples might have cut them all up. Charlotte, of course, is the lone dissenting voice. She asks Carrie if wearing a naked dress means she's planning on sleeping with Big. Carrie acts as though the thought never crossed her mind. She then gives them all whiplash as she changes lanes to instead say that her appearance for the date is just the trailer. She doesn't clarify which movie it's the trailer for, but all signs point to Fatal Attraction. Charlotte presses further, saying that Carrie should keep Big in a holding pattern for 5 days before even thinking about putting out. She then says that the third date would also be too soon. Charlotte, bless her, doesn't seem to make the connection between her own singledom and her apparent expectation that she's taken from date 1 to 3 inside of a working week. The girls banter back and forth, covering the usual ground: Charlotte the conservative, Samantha the progressive, Miranda the moderate. Then Carrie chimes in with her own offering. There's something to be said for restraint. Because I'm sure the dozen regular readers of her column are clawing at the shutters of the newsstand every week for their next dose of restraint. On her way down to meet Big at the door, Carrie stops for a quick fourth wall breaking confessional and top up for her cavernous stores of hypocrisy. She admits that she's dying to sleep with Big but plans to hold out because it's the more mature route. Once again, this is a sex columnist basically saying that wanting or having it on your own timetable is a stupid idea. As expected, she breezes right past the fact that she'd just lied to her friends again, and in doing so made Samantha and to a lesser degree Miranda comparatively sound like they'd just ridden a wave of bodily fluids out of the backseat of a car down at the docks. Once inside of Big's town car, Carrie flashes him a bit of thigh and he cheerily informs her that he's perfectly capable of restraining himself. Yikes. Not that this sort of behaviour has really gone anywhere in the last 20 years, but his shit-eating grin suggests that he thinks this deserves some kind of award. But not to worry, they immediately and consensually jump each other's bones and head back to Big's place, where they spend the night playing hide the probably misshapen and kind of grey sausage. Having gotten what she wanted, Carrie then immediately resumes her usual game playing by refusing to be the first to speak afterwards. She remains bottom of the leaderboard though, so not only blurts out that she didn't mean for them to sleep together, more lies, but asks Big the kind of question which nobody wants a real answer to immediately post-coitus. What do you think? Big, who at this point evidently doesn't fully comprehend who and what he's dealing with, tries to dodge the question with an impromptu Szechuan dinner. Carrie's increasingly frantic paranoia is their third wheel, as she sachets into the restaurant wondering whether it's all a big plot to stop her spending the night at his place. Just when it seems that she's about to shake uncontrollably and bite him like an overstimulated chihuahua, Big is saved when Carrie spots a friend, Mike Singer. Carrie says that she's known Mike for 10 years, but they never did it because they want to know each other for another 10. There must be a lost episode somewhere because you'll never see or hear from Mike again after this. Mike is dining with a lady who, sitting near Carrie's peanut smuggling dress, we're obviously supposed to see as plain and unassuming, but by comparison, she actually looks like a nice regular woman in a room full of sociopaths. Mike's discomfort is palpable as he first tries to ignore Carrie's intrusion and then begrudgingly allows her to introduce herself to the lady in question. He dispatches her back to Big with a twitchy promise to call her later. Carrie is confused. Why wouldn't Mike want to introduce her to his date? Here's a thought, Carrie. Not every table in every restaurant will be filled with people whose bucket list is topped with the entry, "Exchange pleasantries with Z-list columnist." Of course, this is Carrie's show when all is said and done, and a neurotic stopped clock is still right twice a day, which means that ultimately her concern over Mike's dismissiveness is well placed in spite of her belief that every room in Manhattan is on the edge of its seat waiting for her arrival. But we'll get to that. That same night, we're told, something absolutely amazing happens to Miranda. To the surprise of literally nobody, that something turns out to be her roundhouse kicking a guy in the face. It might have been a gym accident, but anyone with a passing knowledge of Miranda's feelings towards men would be forgiven for wondering whether she hopes to end any given evening by sending one to the coma ward. She at least pretends to be sorry, and her victim, the I assume coincidentally named Ted Baker, walks her home. Ted, who clearly has a death wish, decides to dangle his nethers over the lion's den by asking Miranda out on a date. In voiceover, Carrie unironically lists Ted's pros: a sports medicine doctor, owner of an apartment overlooking the Natural History Museum, unmarried. I'm not saying people don't act this way, but there has to be a better system for finding a husband than running through his features like you're shopping for a new laptop. The next day, Carrie makes a beeline for Mike to find out what the deal was with his perfectly normal date Libby. She goes with him to pick out sheets, a task which apparently requires them to climb into a showroom bed together. Carrie runs through a list of potential issues with the relationship before Mike finally tells his painful tale. Poor Mike, fresh from a breakup, met Libby while she was handing out cheese samples in a shop. Advertising director Mike, seemingly unaware that Sex and the City's version of New York has enough carbon copies of him to put Xerox to shame, whinges about how Libby isn't beautiful or unique enough for him to be seen with her in public. Boo-hoo. As is customary, Carrie sets a new land speed record getting back home to turn a friend's personal life into her latest column. She ponders how many people out there having great sex but are ashamed of who they're having it with. She poses the same question to Samantha, who quickly realizes that she correctly doesn't feel any shame for any of her bedroom encounters. Much as I think Samantha is the only person on the show who ever displays a consistent level of common sense, she does suffer a rare misfire here when she suggests that Big should join the four friends when they gather on the bus route to view Carrie's upcoming ad. Samantha, taking some pot-stirring lessons from Carrie, then casually asks whether Charlotte ever mentioned a rabbi she was involved with. The scent of easy copy in her nostrils, Carrie races down to Charlotte's art gallery and demands to know more. Charlotte testily informs her that he wasn't a rabbi, but a Hasidic folk artist from Brooklyn. We get a flashback which implies that Charlotte's interest in the artist was half to do with his talent and half to do with some bizarre mid-30s religious rebellion against her father. Electra complex be damned. Knowing full well who she's dealing with, Charlotte makes Carrie swear that none of this will make it to print, and we get an unintentionally hilarious smash cut to Carrie probably doing exactly that back home. She's distracted from her newest betrayal by a call from Big, inviting her to a proper first date. On said date, they abandon all self-awareness to discuss how much prestige Carrie's bus advert will have based on the route it takes. She's in the middle of inviting Big to the bus viewing when a friend of his interrupts them. Big awkwardly fails to introduce Carrie and then compounds his obvious embarrassment by taking her back to the same Szechuan place they went last time. There are many things you can do to Carrie which she'll shrug off easily. Objectify her, use her, demean her, all things she can spin into positives given enough time. But the one thing you absolutely cannot do to Carrie Bradshaw is deprive her of the attention which is the source of all her powers. She makes her excuses and calls Mike, asking why he chose that particular restaurant for dinner with Libby. He confirms her worst fears, namely that it's the perfect place to go with somebody you're embarrassed to be seen with. When he realizes what that says about Carrie and Big's dynamic, Mike laughs in a way that shows just how much those in her orbit are rooting for Carrie's downfall. Remember how Miranda met that doctor? I know, I don't care either, but we have to talk about it anyway. Ted's off to a conference and tells Miranda to stay in his apartment as long as she wants. Of course, the second he's out the door, she rifles through every single thing he owns, looking for intel on the enemy. She finds exactly what she's looking for when she discovers a dirty, spanking-themed VHS in a drawer. Her reaction is where we see once again how somebody like Libby is demonised for not being a model and selling cheese. But hotshot lawyer Miranda? She's portrayed as being well within her rights to steal the tape, watch it with Carrie, and openly wonder whether this, of all things, is a reason why she can't see Ted ever again. Carrie resists the urge to ask why her friend is constantly on the lookout for a reason to kill and eat her dates, I'd guess because she's just glad to be having a conversation about Miranda's love life that doesn't involve Skipper's rancid mop top. Later, the friends gather in stupid party hats and sip champagne in the rain while they wait for Carrie's bus to come past. Mike appears and seems surprised that Libby recently dumped him in favour of somebody less afraid of intimacy, even though he asked her to be seen in public with him. He doesn't seem to realise how that sounds or what it says about him, but he's in exactly the right group for that not to be noticed or mentioned. Carrie's bus eventually rolls up, and she's horrified to see that somebody with an excellent sense of humour has scrawled a gigantic willy right next to her mouth. That evening, Miranda, previously disgusted by Ted's extremely private movie collection, decides to give being shallow a try when she's swayed by him buying her an expensive dinner. She leans into it so hard that she, in a roundabout way, offers to recreate his naughty tape with him for real. Here, a show with a supposedly open-minded and progressive view of sexuality manages to completely misinterpret the relationship, or lack thereof, between what somebody likes to watch and what they like to do. We're supposed to think that Ted realises that Miranda has seen the tape and is so embarrassed of his sex secret, see what they did there? Being out in the open, that he never sees her again. I think the more likely scenario is that he had a completely normal and understandable reaction to it being specifically Miranda that wants to haze him. Presumably terrified that some light spanking would be Miranda's gateway drug to full-blown murder, Ted goes into hiding. Later, a drunken Carrie stops by Big's apartment to end things with him due to his assumed shame over their relationship. He explains away the restaurant, awkward friend encounter, and no-show at the bus party with some fairly lame excuses which Carrie swallows immediately and without question. Not because they were especially convincing, but because Carrie didn't really go over there to dump him the way she claims. She went there looking for a fig leaf, no matter how tiny, to cover up her own embarrassment so that she could keep seeing Big. And once she gets it, it's straight off to bed as if none of it ever happened. Which is a shame, because if Carrie didn't have a binary emotional range, she could have avoided pretty much everything coming her way in their future shenanigans. But then, that wouldn't be any fun for the rest of us, would it? So that's it for this video. If you like what you see, subscribe for more, feel free to drop a like and let me know what your thoughts on this episode are in the comments. Was Carrie's paranoia justified? Was Miranda's nosiness understandable? Has a Hasidic folk artist ever blown your back out in a loft? Whatever the answer, thanks for watching, and as ever, if you can't be good, be crusty.